the question my lab asks is, how does this clock know what the time is? There's no point in having a clock unless it's telling you the right time. So how does this clock, which is in our genes, know what the time is in the outside world? And you've all experienced that the clock does rely on these time cues, and sometimes it gets it wrong. So a classic example is jet lag. So when you fly to a different time zone, it always takes you a few days to lock onto that new time zone, and for all your behavior, including your sleep wake, to then follow that new time zone. And so that also gives you a clue as to what the clock is actually looking for. It's looking for environmental light. So environmental light is really the main time cue that tells your clock what the time of day is. And the way light works is that light during the day, so around midday, has very little effect on the clock. But light at dusk, so the time at which the sun's expected to set, if you see light at dusk, what happens is the clock receives that light signal, and if that dusk signal continues too late, it thinks it's seeing light too late, and therefore it must be ticking too slow, right? So it needs to speed up. It needs to change how it's aligned to the outside world, and therefore it shifts. And therefore light at dusk causes a phase delay, and the next day you wake up slightly later, so then you miss that. On the other hand, if you see light at dawn, early in the morning, what happens is the clock thinks it's seeing light too early, and therefore it needs to compensate, and therefore what happens is the next day, you wake up earlier, and therefore you miss that period of light. So the clock is really looking for cues at dusk and dawn to then decide whether it's aligned itself correctly to the outside world.